me something, Uncle Money?
How you guys doing today? We have another episode of Practice Prosperity. We have a special guest, Dr. Marlon Jackson. He is a dentist in the Atlanta area. He's my own personal dentist. He makes sure he keeps my pearly teeth white. But he's going to help guide us on, so you become a dentist, what's next? What are some of those pitfalls, those things you should be looking out for when it comes to money and things you should worry about now that you are a practicing dentist? Welcome today, Dr. Jackson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Avery, and I appreciate, for one, being your dentist. And yes, you do have a lovely smile, handsome gentleman. But more importantly, for the purpose of why I'm on is, like you said, you're a dentist now, so what? But thank you for having me on today.
Awesome. So just to give the listeners some perspective, tell me a little bit about, your practice, how you've been able to grow over the couple of years, how you practice, and what makes your practice unique.
Well, I'd love to tell you that. First of all, a little background about me. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Columbus. I was divinely led to have the purpose of being a dentist. In my family, I have a nurse and I have a brother who's an ophthalmologist. My mother was really instrumental in making us have higher professional aspirations. So I'm very thankful for her. But in terms of me and practicing dentistry, I've practiced for over 40 years. This is my 40-year anniversary, and I'm real proud of that. I'm glad to say that because I still have the lust, the zest, and the purpose and the skills to perform. I'm quite happy about that. And, I've had a few, like I said, being in practice over 40 years, you'll see a lot. You'll see the ups and the downs. You'll see the financial challenges. You'll see the health challenges. All these things come into play. Mm-hmm. But I've been a general dentist for, like I said, 40 years. And you probably hear that a lot because, they say when you try to master any skill, it takes about 10,000 hours or about 5 to 10 years. Well, if you got a skill for 10 years and you got a basic master, 40 years makes you a double or quadruple master. So it kind of puts you in the perspective of you might not have seen it all, but maybe 90%. So, but I practice general dentistry, but I don't just do filling and drillings. I do a lot of veneers. I do implants, full mouth reconstruction, or surgery, whatever comes to mind. So, yes, and I find it all still fulfilling after 40 years, Mr. Avery.
Love that. I love that for you. And you're pretty much somewhat of Atlanta in the metro area. When I told my granddad that you were my dentist, he was like, yeah, I know him. So you've not only put in the work as far as your patients, you put in the work in the community and sharing your information about dentistry. So it goes beyond just the patient sitting in a chair. So I appreciate you doing what you do in Atlanta. So that's awesome. Now, you're a dentist. So when you became a dentist, what did you think about money? Like, go back to as soon as you began practicing, received your first paycheck. What was your mindset about money at that time?
Okay. Can we go back just a little further, Mr. Avery? Okay. Let's go back to college. In fact, let's go back to what I was doing in college. Of course, I was trying to study, but if you're like any average college student, you're trying to, make money or grind, as the young people would say, to get that little extra. Even then, we're trying to make a little profit or gap. Okay. But, back then, the average salary for a non-skilled worker, as we would say, is about $8 an hour. Okay, back then. I don't know how it dropped down to 7 and 6, but back then it was about $8, $7, $8 an hour. Well, at $7, $8 an hour, you just have enough money to get from one week to another. There's not much to do. So, but at the same time, what myself and a lot of other college students were inundated with was credit cards. They're real easy to get. And, some people would have 2 and 3, some people would have 8 or 9. Any offer that came by them, they applied and got accepted. So that created another potential pitfall if you're not careful. So my whole point is the income was low, but the ability to make loans that you have to pay back was high. So, that was what the average college student was looking at. Now, as we got into dental school, of course, expenses increased because you had lodging costs, cost of tuition, supplies, and instruments and so forth, of which, and then you got to eat. But most of the time, what we're eating is pizza and lo mein noodles at the time. So basically, our financial IQ at the time was just concentrating on, if you're a doctor, you just make a lot of money. But, we're going to go into that a little later because I got a few figures of what we can go over. So if you remind me, Mr. Avery, we'll go back over, basic average incomes of dentists. And, for physicians, you just have to put in another probably 10 or 15% higher, but it depends. In the real world, they're about the same.
Gotcha.
But my whole point on my financial IQ was I just wanted to make a lot of money, but I didn't have the real plan, the sit down plan of how to go about it. All I wanted to do was matriculate and graduate from dental school.
Gotcha. So over the years, and we're going to get to, the things that dentists need to look out for, but over the years, who was guiding you about finances? Was it just, experience on the job training that helped you grow your wealth? Or was there an uncle or somebody who you looked up to as a mentor? Who was guiding you as you grew your career over the years?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Basically, my best financial planner before I had any degree of financial literacy knowledge was my grandmother. And I have to share an off moment with you, but it was very interesting. We all went on a family trip to Las Vegas. Okay, I was a dentist then, about 5 years in, but we all went. And, at the time, I don't do much gambling anymore, but I like to gamble. I like the crap tables and all that. So when we went to Las Vegas, it was like a child in a candy shop. So I carried a little cash money with me. And I happened, as soon as I got there, as opposed to just enjoying the atmosphere and so forth, I went right to the table. Well, I went on a bad time, had a losing streak. And, I was half my little boodle was kind of gone. So I didn't want to be, because we were going to be there for 3 more days. I didn't want to be flat broke. So I went to my grandmother, who I know had money, and I asked her for some money. And I, told her, I'm working, I got the money. When we get back, I'll pay you back. Well, she didn't give me all the money I wanted. She only gave me half. So since I went and kind of gambled that money away the next day, and all of a sudden I was real low. So I went back with her one more time and told her the same thing. Well, she looked at me and she said this to me, and I impart this to your viewers. She looked at me with a stern look and she said, "Look, grandson, let me tell you something. I always have money. Okay, I have money when I'm at home. And I have money when I go on a trip. When I go on my trips, my bills are paid, everything. And when I come back home, I have money. In other words, I have money all the time." And she kind of kind of threw the money at me in disgust. And I cherish that advice. That's the advice I use today. So conceivably, that was, and I noticed how she always had money and she was able to meet all expenses and help grandchildren and children when needed. So there had to be some kind of financial literacy there for her to be able to have money and maintain real estate holdings and so forth and so on. So yeah, that was my early training.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, I always tell everybody financial literacy starts at the dinner table. The people you're around and love will tell you more about how to, will dictate how you manage money more than you think. So I think that's a beautiful lesson. So let's talk about dentists just getting out and practicing. What are some of the income expectations they should have? I'm a dentist. Let's use Atlanta. I'm a dentist. I graduated dental school. How much should I be making out of dental school?
Okay, excellent question, Mr. Edgar. Well, first of all, the average pre-dental dentist income, a dental student when they go somewhere to work, is going to range between $15 to $20 an hour. Okay, because they don't literally have any other skills unless they've done some other hobbies, you know, like let's just say some of the basic carpentry, electrician, or these days with the internet, streaming, coding, and all that. But aside from that, if they don't have any other skills, the average dollar wage is about $15 to $20 an hour. Well, when you graduate, first of all, you graduate. Congratulations for those who have recently graduated from dental school. But guess what? You've got to get a license in whatever state that you want to practice in, so that you can legally practice dentistry. Well, let's say that you got your license. Oh, now that gives you a big up right there, because now you're in a position to move upward and latitude. So you're in that position now. So a young dentist that was making between $15 and $20 an hour and has passed their licensure exam and their dental practice ready. Now they go from the $15 to $20 an hour to the $70 plus an hour salary range. All right, and for those of you who don't know, I have some advice for you. Make sure that your wage keeps up or surpasses your age. So, in other words, and I've told my children that when they got 15, 16, I begin to tell them that whatever your age is, make sure your wage is at least that or higher. Okay. For those of you who want to know about salaries, well, salaries is easy. You take, let's just say $100,000. But what's the approximate dollar per hour? Okay, you just divide it by half. So if you're $100,000 an hour income, you're making about $50 an hour. But back to dentists, all right. Well, you go from making $15, $20 an hour to $70 an hour plus, depending on the location, the practice, or whatever, whether you try to go private practice, which I'm sure you'll get into later. Well, that's a big gap. You're used to $15, $20 an hour wages, or just basically, if you was in a dorm or whatever, or a small apartment, well, all of a sudden now you're beginning to accumulate money. Now, for those who, like you said, financial literacy wasn't practiced strong at home, that's a big gap. And if you have been what we call deprived, which most dentists are, they're deprived financially, you want some rewards. And sometimes you want more instant gratification. So you're going to go out here and spend. So you can get yourself in a financial quicksand mighty quickly. So that's what can normally happen. The psychology of being a newly licensed dentist and making a whole lot more money than you ever have in your life. That's the first temptation you gotta find is to spend. And I'm gonna say right off the top of the bat, if you're a newly licensed dentist, if I had to do anything differently, I'd find a CFP, a certified financial planner, because that way they'll be able to guide you so much better with that extra income before you start buying unnecessary things that you don't need, or they're not going to help develop your financial security for the future.
I like that. I like that a lot. So, like you said, a couple years, a dentist is deprived. They're living on a low salary, no money at all. A lot of money's going out on student loans and different things. Now that they have this higher salary, a lot of people don't really talk about how do you budget that higher salary. Like you can budget a small number. When the number's large and it feels like the money's never going to end, you may have to, behave in different ways. So how did you budget, or how do you recommend dentists budget their high salary?
Okay, that's an excellent question, Mr. Avery. My answer is depending on what mode you practice. When you graduate and become a licensed dentist, you're either going to do two things. You're either going to buy or establish a practice, private practice, or you're going to associate. Well, these days I will make a high recommendation to associate first, because I went right off into private practice, but because I had a network of other dentists that would guide me while I was a dental student, I had enough confidence to make that. I had a situation where I was able to buy a practice, and the person I bought it from was also in a position of they were establishing franchise dentistry at the time. So I bought a practice, but they also gave me a job at the same time. So that enabled me to be in a hybrid position where I could build my practice, but I was getting income. Because if you set up a practice and you're not buying an existing practice, then you've got to wait for your brand to be established, which can take 3 to 5 years. So, but if you're associating, then you have more income readily, and you're able to take the advice of a financial planner. Otherwise, if you're in a private practice situation, what's going to happen is you're going to find that the expenses get real expensive real quick. And, sometime until, reality is sometimes, even though you might be making a lot of money, the expenses may come too high. And some months, your brand may not be worth as much. Okay, so you may have months where you might be slow, and then there's external factors like, I remember the financial crisis of 2008. I was established dentist, but everything, there was a credit freeze, everything freezed, and patients didn't show up because everybody's money was funny. Well, that was a real difficult time, and I had to weather through that. But what I'm trying to say is everything, you're not gonna always make the money all the time. If you don't plan, and create and maintain that gap, then it's gonna be hard for you in a private practice situation. And it's kind of hard if you're going straight private practice to establish enough for you to have enough income to, plan for the future. But if you have an associateship, you're more able to do that quickly.
You
But
mentioned
you must have a certified financial planner. I have to tell you that. So take it from somebody who's been in business 40 years. Get that CFP, that certified financial planner, so they can give you that advice that you don't know, because as a newly licensed dentist, you're a financial imbecile. You don't know nothing. You just know that you have a capability to make money.
You mentioned that it takes a while to build a brand. How have you seen dentists in private practice be able to build that brand? Because I think a lot of people may have an itch to go out on their own, but they're like, who's going to actually come visit me? How long does it take? Explain the experience of building a brand that you've seen other dentists do, or things that you have leveraged yourself.
Okay, well, there's a myriad of circumstances that can help the success of a practice. Location is one. You have to have a great location. Mm-hmm. However, people got to understand, you got to look at a location. You might look at a location and say, okay, this is a nice location. I want to practice here because it's fine. It doesn't seem like there's where you think you might have a nice, I'll say, your socioeconomic class of patients may be a little higher. But guess what? As times change, your location might be dying. Example, Buckhead 20 years ago was the epitome to have a practice in Buckhead, Atlanta, Georgia. Well, now it's slowly, things are affecting and people are going other places. Like right now, one of the best places, the new and upcoming places to practice is probably in Midtown, Atlanta, Georgia. It used to be the suburbs where you can go and make a lot of money. But like I said, you may choose a location, but the location may change and your patient base may change. So you have to be able to adapt to the circumstances or conditions. So location is important. And having the right staff. See, dentists aren't trained on human resources either. Okay. We don't know how to hire the right people. We don't know what we're looking for. All we know is we need somebody, and we don't know how to read resumes. We don't know how to ask questions from the resumes to determine the authenticity of a resume. So, and a lot of times, I know in the beginning when I was looking at people, I didn't call their references either. I just hired them because they gave me a few minutes and gave me a good 5-minute first impression. But having the right staff is important because, for one, the dentist, if you're not careful, you're going to micromanage, which means you're going to be there to do dental assistant things, front office, secretary things. And that leaves you less time to be a dentist, to do the dental services. Plus, you're not able to develop your financial literacy because you're so busy trying to do everybody's job. But once you got a decent staff and you treat them well, you're going to have to pay them, you're at least going to have to pay them what the market bears. And depending on what conditions are, you may have to increase it. Like during the pandemic, dental support personnel, their hourly rate increased tremendously because of the pandemic. And there was a lot of dental personnel that were leaving because they were scared, which meant that the remaining dental support personnel, it was their market. They go where they can get the highest salary. Well, the pandemic is pretty much over now, so they're going to find in a year or two to come that the hourly rate is going to kind of drop a little bit because a lot of dentists can't afford to pay that much into the overhead. Because when you do financial literacy, they tell you, well, you'll learn that you want to keep your overhead, and overhead is the cost of doing business. So what you got to have is to find out where you are in your overhead. If you're in let's just say a nice lavish location that looks nice, you got a nice facade, and all that, you might even be in one of these skyscrapers. Nice view of the city and all that. Well, that cost, that's a fixed rent. Well, you got a nice lavish location. Well, the staff has got they're looking at that and they're saying, hey, you can pay a nice lavish fee for our services too. So all that adds on the cost of dental equipment, cost to advertise, and you're gonna have to do something because nobody knows your brand. Okay. And if I can take a few minutes on brand, or if you want to, I know you're trying to cover as much information as possible. I do tend to run my mouth, Mr. Avery, so please just kind of move me forward so we can stay on task.
No problem. I would like to spend a little time on branding, like as far as like, how do dentists get the word out that they're open for business? Do you recommend, newspaper, radio, social media? Like, what do you see today that is helping dentists gain clients?
Okay. Of course, we know the internet because back in the day when I started, the internet wasn't even invented. So I was using flyers, newspaper. I have, and not like the main local newspaper, but they have smaller newspapers because of cost. I look around my particular community at the time and try to get flyers out. I'd also go out to the community myself because I had the time. So I would meet people and, to increase my people skills. Because the first thing is when people come into a dental office and they finally meet the doctor, they're going to meet the front office person, they're going to meet the dental assistant. Finally, the doctor gets the call, Mr. Avery's ready. So the doctor has to come in and for a first patient, and because you have people have zero awareness of your brand yet, you got to come into that operatory with that energy in 2 to 3 minutes. The patient has to first like you as a person, and then in the next 5 to 10 minutes, they got to have trust in you that you know what you're doing and that you're competent and professional so that they can say, I want to come back. You can do whatever advertising you want. And you can get, let's just say you get 40 new patients a month or higher, okay? We all look at our practice demand or our brand in dental terms is, what's your demand? New patient demand. Do you have, if it's 5 patients or less a month, well, your practice is slowing down. All right. If you've got 40 patients a month, then you're what we call in high demand, okay? Because you have a whole lot of new patients coming. Well, that's good. But guess what? As you keep moving on and building your practice, you got to keep the patients you have. It's one thing to get new patients, and I love new patients even today, 40 years later. But it's the ones that come back that you have to highly value, because those are the ones that's going to make the referrals. And people like personal referrals. They want to hear something. In fact, I had a patient the other day that came, a new patient, they see me and they said, well, Eric, I've been hearing all about you, so I'm here. So somebody was so impressed with Dr. Jackson and the practice that they said, you got to go there. So that was not, you should, it was like, you got to. So that was like the best advertising possible is word of mouth. But when you're just establishing a practice, you don't have any word of mouth. So you got to spend a lot on advertising. But my whole point was for your overhead, they have a little chart on overhead. If you're a dentist, it's not hard. Google or the internet has done so much for us all that I didn't have when I was a young dentist. So that you'll know what your overhead is and where your what the suggested percentages is. It's just like rent. Rent shouldn't be that much more than 5%. Salaries, excluding the hygienist, to be 15 to 20%, something like that, so that you will hopefully have at least 30% that goes to you. And then the other is practice expenses. That's how it starts out. Now, as you get more advanced in your practice building, financial literacy, hopefully you'll get up to 50%, maybe 60%. And if you're lucky, you might get to 70%, where you have 70% income and 30% expenses. All right. But that's kind of hard to do in some of these real nice lavish practices because of other overhead, the rent and all that so high. So you keep all these things in mind when you're trying to select the practice and build it. Once you select the practice, if you're going the private practice route, I would suggest that you get an existing practice. At least you have a fighting chance of building a brand. And if you get an existing practice, hopefully you have the same or similar philosophy of care that the doctor that you're buying the practice from. That makes it easier for you to build your brand, and the patients will accept the type of dentistry that you're trying to provide.
So when somebody, let's say, wants to buy a practice, I think we talked about this. A lot of times there's these companies that will actually help you finance those practices. They'll give you a loan. They may actually help you find a location, build the building for you. It's like a turnkey dental office. The only thing that they won't probably do for you is find clients. And maybe there's some service provider that does that now. But speak on the risk of going to these businesses and gaining financing from them. Like, how does that work nowadays?
Okay. Dental supply companies, that's a very, very needed part of doing business in the profession of dentistry. It begins in dental school. You know, you might have some dental supply companies either supplying you the tools and materials during your dental student career. However, when you graduate, you're going to need dental supplies. So therefore, there's the dental supply company. Well, from my experience, and probably I share similar sentiments with my other colleagues, is when you're trying to get a dental practice, private practice, set up a private practice, a dental supply company is indispensable for your success. They have so much knowledge, so much statistics, and they do certain things. First of all, they'll find out about you and what you like, and then they'll help you. If you don't have a certain approximate location, they'll help you. They'll find out what's hot and where the trends is, whether the area is, let's just say if it's dying or decaying, they'll have all that in mind. And they'll kind of guide you with that. And then they'll definitely help you with financing. But before we get to financing, they'll help you design. You need somebody to help design the office if you're trying to build a new practice. Why is that important? Because they kind of know. They know the ergonomics. Okay. They know how to make it so that you have building codes in terms of how you want to design it. They'll look at the space that you picked, or if you're building from scratch, you've got to have an architect for the building and all that. But even so, when you get to that point, when you want to design the interior of the office, they're indispensable with that and very, very helpful, so that you can practice more efficiently and comfortably. Because if you're not efficient and comfortable, that's one of the things that can lead to burnout. And I think we need to get to that probably toward the end or somewhere.
Now, how are these supply companies paid? Are they paid purely off the interest rate spread of what they're financing? Because that's a lot of work, providing you that research, picking out a location. I'm sure they have references for designers for everything you can imagine. Like, how are these dental supply companies financed. And do you know any names of supply companies that you've seen in the Atlanta metro area?
Oh, well, make sure you deal with several dental supply companies in terms of dental supply companies that I think are very reputable. When I was coming out, they had Atlanta Dental Supply, and they dealt with me in school, so I was familiar with them. And I initially, when I did my first practice, I initially used them. But there's Darby, there's Patterson in the Atlanta area, and there's several others. But what they have is resources. They can help you with financing because they have a turnkey operation with the banks. And in terms of dental equipment, of course, they're a dental supply company. So how do they make their money? Well, they'll help you pick the office. They'll help you get the financing. You'll need dental equipment. Well, that's where they make their money. You'll get, in this case, in these days, they'll help you get the couple $100,000 that you need to set up. All right. And then they will also, in terms of, they'll give you guidance in terms of suggestions on, they may even have people that you can hire to work in your office. So they're a tremendous resource. One thing I'll caution a new licensed dentist that wants to go into private practice is to, again, be realistic. Don't be so deprived. Okay. Do you really need, let's say you picked an office and you design an office that has 8 operatories or rooms for you to do dentistry, and you have 0 brand right now. Do you really need all them rooms? And do you need all them rooms installed and operated? Maybe you just need 2 or 3 right now. You can keep the others for later, but get enough equipment for what you need. All right? Because if you have an 8 operatory office and you decide you got to have 8 chairs and all the equipment and cabinets and all that, well, there goes your expenses. They're up, and your income or revenue is not meeting it. So you've already created a little financial pressure that you need. So get what you need, figure that out, and plan. You may say, okay, I'm gonna start off with 2 or 3 rooms, and I will, another year or 2 as I'm making more money, add to that. So, because they'll give you what you want, in the bank, depending on some other things that I'm sure if we talk, well, let's just bring it out. Credit. All right. Well, if your credit's decent, then what they'll do is they'll give you what you want. They'll easily put you in $1 million debt because they know that they got, that $1 million worth of equipment and leasehold renovations, and if you bought the building, it might be over that. It might be $2 million. So they'll be more than happy to put you in that situation. However, are you going to, and another thing about being a dentist and financing, right? Like I said, the average cost of an office installation and leasehold improvement is, let's just say, $250,000, $200,000 or $300,000, right? Well, the bank could give you that. However, or let's just say 500,000, because you want to be fancy, you want to be the best, and you want everybody to talk about your facade and all that. You want that eye candy location. So now it's even higher. So let's just say you've got $500,000 financing that you're trying to work off. But the thing about it is your practice going to be able to sustain and support that $500,000 debt, which like I said, the dental supply companies will be more than happy to accommodate you if you got decent credit. It won't be a problem. However, they'll get you set up, and then they may support you and check on you every now and then, but you're on your own with that $500,000 debt. Okay.
Now, when we talk about so let's talk about take home money taken home out of the business. How do you think about taking money? Is it, hey, whatever's left over, I take home to myself? Is it a percentage that you think about? And what percentage do we reinvest back into the business? Like, how do you make those business decisions?
Okay, well, let's just start off with that $500,000 figure I was talking about. All right. Like you said, initially is what's left. Oh, that's my big point. I will miss on that. Once you make whatever financial arrangement, let's just say $500,000. All right. All right. Once you said, okay, that's how much money I'm going to invest to start a practice. All right. How much is it usually when you get a loan? How much time they give you to pay back, Mr. Avery?
It depends. I mean, it sounds like there could be a mortgage and a lease rolled into that. Let's say a 10-year period. Say 10 years.
No, I'm talking about for a home mortgage at home.
A home mortgage, 30-year mortgage.
Okay. 30 or maybe 15, right?
Yeah.
Let's just say 30 keeps people more comfortable. Okay, because a lot of things can happen in 30 years.
Yeah.
With your financial situation. Well, $500,000 over 30-year period is probably $2,200, $2,300 a month, something like that. Okay, well, for dentists, you don't get 30 years. You get about 5 or 7 years. So you got 5 or 7 years to pay back that $500,000. So I'm gonna let the financial expert, Mr. Avery, tell you how much that approximately costs. But it's a lot of money. It's a lot. Okay. And that stress right there is how you begin a budget. So that's why I'm saying in today's atmosphere of trying to get a private practice, you must have a financial plan, because otherwise there's going to be too much stress and other distractions that's going to take you from trying to have a financial plan towards financial security. So I had to bring that in. You only get 5 to 7 years unless you get an SBA loan. And most people don't get SBA loans because it takes too long. You're trying to get this money kind of right now. So, but you only get 5 to 7 years to pay that money back.
And when you figure out, after you pay, you have to pay the note, the debt, you have to pay operating expenses, hygienists, or dental assistants, and then comes to you like, as a private practice owner, there's not a company 401k. How do you save for retirement? Like where does the money go? Where do you see people use that profit at the end of the day, like to grow their own personal wealth?
Well, speaking for me personally, I can't say about everybody else, because in my initial days, like I said, I didn't have a fine individual like you that could guide me. It was just a hit or miss. When I had the money, I was probably like any other young dentist, I was deprived. So I spent it on wants. And it didn't take me till year 10 till I started thinking, okay, I've got a little money. Okay, I'm used to having money, a little money now. I've got a handle on my expenses, and what do I decide to do with it? So it takes a little time, year 1 through 5, unless you have somebody like yourself to guide you, or you had somebody at home or at the kitchen table to help you, like your father or something like that, who had a higher business acumen that could guide you. It's going to take a minute. In year 1 through 5, you got to figure out what your average brand brings in a month. From there, that's how you begin to determine your budget. But to be honest with you, year 1 through 5 with a $500,000 debt load, kind of hard for you to even think about having anything left at the end of the month. You got to get the patience in there make that happen. And until you see what your brand is worth, you can't possibly determine. Your budget is in strict survival mode, just getting enough revenue in there to pay your debt load. If you've got $500,000 to pay back in that 5 to 7 years, you're looking at approximately $20,000 a month that you got to bring in just to pay the financing. I'm not talking about payroll. I'm not talking about rent. I'm talking about the amount that you finance. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, that $20,000 sounds like a lot of money. But when you're in that position where you're a new dentist and you've committed yourself to that kind of level of practice, if you don't have $20,000 coming into your account every month, checks are going to bounce. Bills are not going to be paid. Trust me.
Wow. So for the last question, this is, practice prosperity. What is the number one advice you would give dentists today? Well, what is something that's like, hey, this is the biggest game changer?
There's a lot of things that could be a big game changer, but when you decide in your mind that, okay, let's see, we left a lot of things out of that because you have a practice, and let's just say you're married and you want to start a family, well, then you got more load and more distractions and pressures on you as an individual to make. And we didn't factor all that in, but I'm gonna assume that I've introduced that into the equation. So the biggest game changer to put you on the road to financial stability and financial literacy is for you to have a come to Jesus moment. Right? You have to have a time where, like I said, you're paying $20,000 a month for financing and different bills, and I didn't even bring the other part in. There's really three parts. There's student loans, there's financing for your practice, and then there's financing for your family or your home life. Okay, so that's quite a bit. So we didn't cover that, but those are all the three factors a young dentist needs to keep in mind when they're trying to establish a practice, have a home life. Okay, but what I mean by the come to Jesus moment, you're either going to have a financial scare or a financial scare, like I said, for me, the 2008, I was well established, seeing a lot of patients. And then all of the sudden, conditions out of my control dictated an American slowdown, which to me was an American, what, like they say, a severe recession. It was a severe recession. And those things kind of make you think a lot about, okay, what do you need and what don't you need? And when you start rebuilding, how are you going to make better choices? So, yes, I'll say a come to Jesus moment or a time that's going to put a real threat to your practice. And you got to sit down and say, okay, I need to think things differently here. So, yeah, a threat.
Definitely. Yeah. There's a threat that could always come at any time, and being emotionally prepared for that, to have that come to Jesus moment, that's important. So thank you very much, Dr. Marlon Jackson, for joining for Practice Prosperity. I think we need to have you back on because we haven't covered things like relationships, managing student loan debts. These are key factors dentist comes in. So I hope you'll be open to coming back on to our show.
I would love to do that, Mr. Avery, and thank you for being able to broadcast on your podcast. I hope that I'm able to give the listeners something. I do have more to offer because there's so many things that a young dentist needs to be successful. So thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. Well, you take care.
All right.
The more I know, the more money I can make.